Kittens, bunnies, puppies, pigs, and more are used for animal testing. Over 115 million animals throughout the world are used as subjects for animal testing. I bet you didn't know that. And we're not just talking about putting lipstick on a pig, we're talking about animals being injected and exposed to products to determine the safety use for humans. So today, we'll go over what animal testing is, what the effects of animal testing are, and the alternatives that everyone should be using for animal testing. So some say that animal testing has contributed to many life-saving cures and treatments. With 8 different facilities in Iowa alone, let's dig a little deeper into what animal testing is. According to HSI.org, animal testing is procedures performed on living animals to research diseases, research the effectiveness of new medicine, and test products like cosmetics, household cleaners, and more. These tests are performed on animals to determine the safety for human use. But during some of these procedures, animals are being force-fed. They are being given injections in their skin, abdomen, and muscles. Animals are exposed to drugs and diseases. They are being deprived of food and water, along with being physically restrained for short and long periods of time. And also, surgical procedures are performed on animals to study how they recover. But these experiments can last up to months or years. And at the end, if the test passes or fails, the animal is most likely killed. But there are the lucky few who get to be thrown into another cage for months to continue to be tested on. So now that we have some knowledge about what animal testing is, we can look into the effects that are caused by these experiments. According to PETA.org, in some universities around the United States, there have been stress experiments conducted on mice and rats. They put these mice or rats in a tube which would immobilize them, and then they would proceed to shock their feet, or they would suspend them by their tails, or they would throw them into water and force them to swim to avoid drowning. In cases like these, animals are immobile for months at a time, but that's not the only thing that's happening to these animals. In more than 1,000 laboratories across the country, cats are having holes drilled into their heads and becoming deaf. Monkeys are being exposed to drugs and eventually get addicted to them. Cats are purposely being blinded. Mice are made to have seizures constantly, and dogs are intentionally being poisoned. Animals are in constant pain and are living stressful and unnatural lives. But they live in confinement, and the only change that comes to that is when they're being drugged off to become another tested subject in another experiment, which of course will always most likely end in death. But the main reason we have animal testing is to study what the effects are on the animals and to determine if it's safe enough for human use. But according to Paula Moore, who wrote an article on animal testing is a huge failure to helping humans. Studies have proven that experiments have not benefited humans with cardiovascular disease, strokes, cancer, diabetes, obesity, and more. And 9 out of 10 drug studies pass in animal tests but don't in humans. The few that do pass are often pulled from the market because they eventually sicken or kill humans. But eventually people realized that continuing to use animals wasn't going to help them solve their problems, so they came up with alternatives to animal testing. Scientists have moved on to using human cells and tissues in place of animals. And they found out that these cells and tissues are faster, cheaper, and more relevant to humans. And they've also started replicating human organs so that we can use advanced brain techniques to study the brain all the way down to the neuron instead of intentionally brain-damaging animals. Well, that just about wraps up this speech, but before we go, let's take a quick recap of what we went over today. First, we talked about what animal testing is, then we looked into the effects of animal testing, and then we looked into the alternatives that everyone should be using for animal testing. So the 115 million animals around the world that are living in cages all their lives and being tested on every day are all suffering for nothing. And there are hardly any beneficial experiments that benefit both human and animal. But by continuing these non-animal methods, we can start finding treatments and cures for humans that are not only effective but also reliable. And when we start saving millions of people's lives, we can remember the 115 million animals that we also saved. Thank you.